We're a group of Gen Xers learning about our ADHD and neurodiversity later in life. Join us as we discuss interesting clips we find online and how they relate to our own life experiences. Welcome to This Is How My Brain Works. Welcome to This Is How My Brain Works. Good to see everyone here. I'm going to share my screen.
I didn't really think I had ADHD or a neurodiverse condition like that. At the time, you just feel like you're different, and that's what takes its toll on yourself. The teachers thought I was just being naughty, as the normal perception is. It was hell during my first few years at secondary school. So we sort of getting excluded all the time, detentions all the time, not feeling understood. You know, I started going down the wrong path, sort of smoking, selling drugs. Excluded from school a lot. I felt, really, really depressed, really anxious, at times even suicidal, This was all down to the frustration and the anger.
It was a really difficult time for me, and it impacted all my family. I got so frustrated that, my parents would always side with the teachers.
I felt like you and the teachers and everyone else was on the same team, and there was me all on my own, being misunderstood by everybody.
We just thought you was playing up. We couldn't understand. Feeling that you can't help your son or daughter is like a terrible position to be in. So, yeah, me and your mum, we went through, like you did, an horrendous time. It affects the whole family.
All right, is everybody on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. The first time I saw that, it was very, I got pretty emotional because of how he mentioned being alone or feeling alone. And then the parents just feeling like at a loss. Because it's like they don't know about neurodiversity. They're kind of looking to the teacher for some guidance. They don't know. And so it's easy to see how quickly you can get those bad narratives going. And I just really empathize with that kid. And I'm glad that he was able to, get some support like early on to kind of repair with his family, but then also kind of understand how to move forward through education and your first couple jobs and that kind of stuff. So he had those tools where when you don't have that early on, you just gotta that's where you start kind of developing these coping mechanisms. You figure out how to just plow through. That's where you kind of get this grittiness, I think. And so while I'm proud of having this grittiness and ability to just figure stuff out and push through, I also, there's also that negative stuff that comes up. If I feel like someone is slacking or not really trying to push through, I have less empathy for that, because it's like, hey, figure it out. Like I had to. And it wasn't even like, it's not even like I had to because I had ADHD. It's just like, why aren't you finding a way through this? Or why are you,
But also, do you think, Michael, that that's also just part of our as a Gen Xer, I think we come very much from a place of you pull up the bootstraps, figure it out, push through. So I think you're getting it almost twofold.
Yeah.
You've got your personal experience, but also we were raised in a generation that is what you did. That's what you do. You figure it out.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, and in fact, that's interesting that you bring that up, Krista, because we were part of, the Gen X generation where, there was more independence and figuring things out. That actually was advantageous to me, I would say, or like an ADHD kid, except in a school setting. In a school setting, you're just you're trying to fit yourself into a neurotypical space, which is hard. And then you start developing those narratives that you aren't smart enough, or you're not able to read, and things like that.
So much of that video was about advocating or not being advocated for or whatever. And it's like a zero judgment zone. I do feel like I was a fierce advocate for Cade, quite possibly because there wasn't an advocate for me. And that's not even, that's like, my mother's an autism specialist, but that didn't happen. My mother went back to school later in life. So that was not my, when I was in kindergarten, she was at home, and I think if my mother had known, she would have been a fierce advocate, but it's just, girls do not present the same way. I mean, the whole list goes on and on and on, but, and she helped me advocate for Cade. But I wonder if we become fiercer advocates because we're so clued into what it feels like. Like, Cade was not invited to a birthday party until, my gosh, 3rd or 4th grade, ever. And I think it bothered me a lot more than it bothered him, to be really honest. But it's like that sense of loneliness and not knowing. It's hard. But man, I was a tiger cat when it came to advocating for that kid.
Well, I think back to the generation we came from. No one advocated for us. Mental illness wasn't even a term. There was illness, there was, no one had a term for mental illness. You were either wacko or crazy or a lunatic, or you needed a lobotomy. Like, there was no,
or a woman, or just a woman.
Right. Okay. But no one was advocating for us. There wasn't even, they didn't even know what to advocate for. And no one, having some sort of differences, mental differences, neurodiversity wasn't a word. But that our neurodiversity at that time was, worse than almost having cancer. I mean, nobody talked about it. No one wanted their child to be different or have some issues. It's like you said, pull up your bootstraps and get going and figure it out. And there was no discussion, there was no remedy, there was nothing. So I think as parents, we do that now with our kids. We want to be their advocate. We understand that they need an advocate, to a certain age, when they start to realize, like, I can advocate for myself. But we as parents, that's something we didn't have. So I found that as a parenting generation, we've been a lot more in tune with our kids and the neurodiversity, and been a lot more comfortable with it, and open and able to talk to one another, and to them about it at a very young age.
The stigma is not there like it was. Because imagine the parents that were putting their kids on Ritalin and how they were perceived, like, how could you put your kid on this, and aren't you able to, parent, or, like.
Right. It must be a really low situation if they've got to put him on Ritalin. You know what I mean? They, they had to put Jason on Ritalin.
Yeah,
I don't know, but you understand.
I was at Kate's school, and there was this little girl who walked up to me, and I was there for a party or something. She was like, "I cannot eat dairy, and I cannot eat wheat. I have ADHD," and she went through her list, and she just was like, "I'm just letting you know. Thank you." And I walked away, and I was like, that. And she was, I don't know, this is when Kate was in like 3rd or 4th grade. I was like, that is revolutionary. Even like, it was so interesting. Sarah, I know you were going to say something.
I just, throughout this, all I can hear in my head is, what is wrong with you?
Yep.
As you were playing that video and getting emotional, I was getting emotional, and it just was, what is wrong with you? And it even goes so far as to the parenting of my own children. What you hinted at, Jason, was that, what is wrong with you that you can't parent your child? What's wrong with your kid? Like, what did you what did you do? Like, what's going on at your house that this is happening? And it's hard. And one of my kids, and I don't know that I've talked about this, who is neurodiverse, is also trans. And it's been a
I've
rough,
got that too.
it's been a really rough week. And I used to go every summer with my kids to the South. We'd take a road trip, and we don't do that anymore because I
Either.
don't trust. I want to trust my family. I want to believe that they will be accepting, but I don't trust them. And that's really hard to admit. And if they ever listen to this, I'm sure that that's not easy for them to hear. But I feel very judged that I'm this liberal mom that has pushed my kid into this when that couldn't be further from the truth. And yeah, there's a lot. It makes me think of something that has stuck with me through this journey, which is I don't have to understand to accept. And that,
Right.
And support.
yeah. I mean,
I
but
don't even
once
have to agree. I don't have to agree. I don't have to understand. Like that is not the requirement of love, support, and honor and respect.
So like my question here is, and to just from a why is that? And I want to stay away from politics. I would love, but just the psychology of not being able to accept. I mean, is it just fear
I
of
have
the
theories.
unknown?
I mean, my theory is probably wrong, but I think that when we grow up, for example, let's go back to that kid with his ADHD video. He could never really fit in. But I bet for a long time, at least I know for me, that it wasn't ever thought by him that I'm not fitting in because the environment isn't conducive to me. It's that there's something wrong with me that I can't fit in. And so
100%.
I think anybody who might be on that gender spectrum and had to push it down, the minute that they accept it in someone else, they then see it potentially in themselves, which is identity destroying.
This made me think, I wonder if there's also though been a study around the kiddos who are wherever they are on the spectrum of gender on what the percentage of them are also neurodiverse.
I was going to bring that
Is
up,
there?
a total correlation between trans and autism, along with, weirdly, ADHD and Ehlers-Danlos, which is a hypermobile connective tissue
Oh,
disease.
I just learned I have that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know. I mean, I was a gymnast, but I didn't. Do you guys are you like double jointed and like can like do like
I'm
can you?
ambidextrous too. Yeah.
I'm ambidextrous too. Yeah, yeah. I just learned that there's a correlation between that and that I was I was laying down on my stomach in my yard doing a movie poster for one of my films, and I sort of backed up like on my knees, and I felt my knee pop out of joint, and I popped it back in, and then just got up and kept moving, and I thought that can't be
You did.
like
100%.
that,
So
but that can't be like normal.
I've dislocated my kneecap, my tibia from my kneecap, which is that lower bone.
Yeah.
I've dislocated my elbow bone, this
Yeah.
from my elbow.
But so they were talking about chronic pain, which I have a lot of at times. It seems to happen. I was talking to my massage therapist last night about it. It seems to happen like after the stress. So me being on those two really big jobs those past 2 weeks and walking literally like 12, 13,000 steps a day and on concrete and airports and like, all of stress of all of flying into California, doing a Pineapple Express, like all the things, I was fine. Like my body was like, I'm feeling good. I got home and I was hobbling like 100-year-old human being yesterday before I went to my massage therapist. And I was like, I think there's something that happens that when I let down, like all the lactic acid or I don't know, just like lets out. And we were talking about that chronic pain and the hyper, whatever you call it, that neurodivergent folks tend to have. And so we have to be really careful that it's not just chronic pain. We might actually have done something.
Mm.
And connective tissue is also related to things like your connective tissue is related to your veins and arteries. So like John Ritter had, I forget the name of it, Marfan syndrome. Marfan and Ehlers-Danlos are similar connective tissue disorders. So like when I got diagnosed with it, they did a CT, a scan of my heart and to make sure that I didn't have an enlarged heart or that I didn't have other issues going on. Like I could drop dead potentially. I'm not going to because I checked it, and that's all related, that you really do need to, it's not something to scoff.
Yeah. But most of us don't know.
Mhm.
My grandmother, at the age of 90, 2 years before she died, we have, her mother was a contortionist. So we have contortionists in our family, but at like 90 years old, yeah, circus. It's a fun story. I'll tell you sometime. She was able at like 90 to stand up and like put her, like bend right on over. Like she could have done a roll. She could have like put her hands on the ground. Like that flexibility stayed with my grandmother into her 90s. And it's such an interesting thing because I've always been weirdly like, I can do weird things.
My grandmother at 54 was apparently shit-faced and did the splits against the wall
Nice.
because she could.
Is that a,
Nice, grandma.
Grabbed her foot, pulled it up, and
is that a
Nice.
I
She
have
did a
question.
Barbie.
Krista,
Yeah.
what about hard of hearing deaf community and neurodiversity? Because
It's a really, I would say it's probably, and I certainly don't exactly know. I would suspect from what I do know that the way how someone sort of gains their deafness probably has a lot of correlation with a lot of different things, whether it be neurodiversity or a learning disability or whatever, and sometimes it has nothing to do with anything. And so, but I think what happens when you have anything like blindness, deafness, or whatever, that it has the danger to supersede checking into the other stuff. Or just, you know what I mean? Like, it's like everyone's so focused on the thing as on what they are seeing as the primary, that you may not, you may have kids who are misdiagnosed, put in different places, not frustrated, that who are, my mom, like I said, she's an expert in autism and dyslexia. And there are so many kids who have those issues who are acting out of pure frustration, but they're getting on it's like the IEP, the behavior contract, the BE, they're like they're being suspended and they're doing all. So I would suspect just like that with a kid who's working through anything, deafness, blindness, whatever, that sometimes their level of frustration of not being heard, understood, listened to, focused on, or hyper focused on one thing about them, which might be their deafness or the ability that they're struggling with reading or whatever the thing is that primary focus puts them in a position where they're not being looked at as a whole. And for them, it's probably pretty frustrating.
I just did a quick search, and everything you just said is kind of what it's from the UK. They're like their NIH, but it said often we're learning about the impact of ADHD on deaf children, especially when it comes to late diagnosis of ADHD. This is because symptoms are sometimes mistaken as the normal behavior of a deaf child by some medical professionals. So since ADHD and deafness affect children in different ways, there's not one single approach or diagnostic tool. So yeah.
And meanwhile, the kid who is also got a growing brain and, comes along with any other child that has that growing brain, they're trying to manage the situations the best they can and let people know how they're feeling the best they can with the limited tools that their brain has given them at certain age, in certain age ranges. So it's a toughie. And unfortunately in a lot of different communities with something like that going on, then you have acting out in ways that are just trying to sort of honestly just figure out who they are as they're moving through the world. you know, whether it be through sex. I mean, it's just like those of us who don't have who are not deaf. Like we all like trying to figure it out through sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So yeah,
For
you
me.
know, I just you know, it's just unfortunately when you have certain populations are going to have higher risk of really really negative outcomes because they're just at higher risk of being taken advantage of. For sure.
Well, I mean, I think the fact that there is a lot more
As
understanding,
our autistic kids too, by the way.
yeah, about neurodiversity, like we've been talking about, it can at least be discussed more openly. Obviously, like, you know, the ADHD and the autism and you know, dyslexia, those types of neurodiversity, you know, they're getting more and more destigmatized. You know, we also went into trans and gender identity and those types of things. That's not in a doesn't seem to be in a great place right now with society and just the understanding and the empathy around those things. And I it, you know, humanity is capable of such great and amazing things, and it's so hard to not get discouraged by just the negative things that humanity is capable of as well, you know, as far as just like you know, the judgment and the willful ignorance and the what how destructive just being fearful can be.
And also how boring would our world be if it was all in a binary? If it was all black and white. It was all one or the other.
We wouldn't
And there
have your
was
circus family.
you would not have my circus family. That's right.
Did you guys ever watch Buck Rogers?
Yeah.
BBD BBD.
Yeah.
There was the one episode that has literally, I feel like, has shaped my life. Was they got to this place and all the people wore masks, but under the mask they all looked identical. Anybody see
Mm.
that
I
episode?
think I remember this.
Oh, it's so hard on my heart still. Like it was this visual representation of how boring would the binary be. Like it was, you know, this whole world of the binary only and how unhappy they all were.
Just as a side note, I think we've just made a nice
We have about 3 minutes left, just so y'all know.
discovery here. I think we should
Go
every
watch it.
episode reference some Gen X type thing. So Buck Rogers is this episode's Gen X reference.
Wait,
All right.
Tweety, what was his name?
The
Tweety.
Gen X moment.
Beebity Beebity. What was his name? Twiggy?
What
What was
I
his name?
remember.
You know, there's a part of me that thinks, I mean, Sarah, if you asked 100 people, do you remember this episode from Buck Rogers? I'd say 100 out of those 100 would say no. And what I'm saying is it's special to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I can't
I'm
even
not worried about
like
that.
Buck Rogers. I mean, how old were you? But I love that it stuck with you like that. But no one, I mean,
There's a second Buck Rogers episode that stuck with me. And it was when they were flying in this new, and they came back to Earth. And there were all of these like bridges connecting all the high rises. But then there were all these parks. And I turned to my sister and I said, oh, look, they kept parks in the future. Thank God. Because I thought for sure that with the progress of civilization, it was just paving. We paved paradise, basically, was what I imagined was going to happen. And it was this moment of like, maybe we're not going to do that.
We paved paradise, made it a parking lot.
Yeah. But we kept some parks in Buck Rogers, so.
All right, where are we with
Hey.
time, Krista?
You've got a minute and 40 seconds to wrap us out of this, Michael.
All right. Well,
That's a long time.
I think everybody had a pretty big that kind of impacted a lot could resonate with that boy, that teenager, and just the, you know, the feeling of being different and the feeling of being alone and not understanding what was going on with you, and how valuable it is to actually have those conversations and then ultimately having the trust of your parents and teachers, and how just transformational that can be for yourself. But So I guess just like educate yourself, be tolerant, and what was it, Krista or Sarah, you said, you don't have to understand.
And to accept.
Yeah, you don't have to understand to
You don't
accept
have
it.
to agree to accept. I used
Right.
to say that to my stepdad all the time. It's like, I am an intelligent enough being that I can hold two truths in separate hands and know they're both truth, and accept that, and not have to always be in agreement with everybody
Or self-destruct because of it.
or self-destruct because of it. It was like, come on, we're better than that.
The other last point I would add to your beautiful synopsis, Michael, is when he said he felt like his parents and teachers were on one team and he was
Right.
alone. I want anyone listening, I am on your team. Whatever you need, whenever, wherever, I am committed to raising the love and lowering the judgment.
Get on your kids' team.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that, if anybody's listening to that, you've got other parents here who have walked through that, and Michael, you might be on the edge of starting to walk through that. I will have unreservedly share tips and whatever I need to, if anybody wants to know about how to advocate for your child, in a way that also holds the teachers accountable, and the school and the laws around it accountable, to making sure that they are upholding and uplifting your kid in those classrooms.
Rudy agrees. Okay. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is how my brain works. We'll see you next time.
If you like this episode of This Is How My Brain Works, please like, subscribe, and share. For more info on today's clip, the hosts, and our podcast, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.